Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So let's again look at this European package. This is bad news mostly. The only positive thing here is the principle that debt has to be canceled, written down. But this is too little, too late. It needs to be much more, and not just the bonds that are in private hands, but the bonds that are in the hands of the European Central Bank, IMF, European central banks individually, and so forth. So that will not do. The recapitalization, whether it's 106 billion euros or 20 billion euros, this is hopeless. It's peanuts because you're crushed by hundreds of trillions of dollars of toxic derivative debt. That black hole is going to eat you unless you turn the disintegrator ray on it. And that means widespread debt cancellations, debt moratoria, the 100% haircut, the baldy, not even a crew cut, but a baldy, all hair, right? Mr. Clean, Yul Brenner, you get the idea. Then, this is the worst, the leveraging of the European Financial Stability Fund. This means derivatives. They say that the European Financial Stability Fund, EFSF, with its 440 billion euros is not enough, but they don't want to pay the full amount of getting it up to €1 trillion. So what are they going to do? They're going to use credit default swaps. They're going to use toxic derivatives. That is the secret. This is a program for increasing the amount of toxic derivatives in the world, and it's also putting these countries on the road to being downgraded by these bandit credit rating agencies, these corrupt bandits and intelligence spooks, and it's going to lead to, I think, very bad consequences, even in the short run. So we've got one of these Euro critics, that is to say, I think this is now Jens Weidmann, the head of the Bundesbank. He says, the envisaged leverage instruments, try it again, the envisaged leverage instruments are similar to those which were among the origins of the crisis because they temporarily masked the risks. Those are derivatives, credit default swaps. What can we say? This is what Goldman Sachs did to Greece, and now they're going to do it again. This is absolutely crazy. No more derivatives. Ban derivatives. Outlaw credit default swaps. Don't institutionalize credit default swaps into the European system of government in this way. This is absolutely impossible. And then the fourth point, of course, is the genocidal austerity in the individual countries. Sarkozy now says French growth goes down to 1%. He'll be lucky to have any growth at all. He'll have none. He'll have negative growth. Merkel's point is correct that peace and prosperity are not automatically guaranteed, that a breakup of Europe could conceivably lead to the rebirth of the tensions and the tragedies that we've seen so many times in European history. But the problem is, Merkel, you cannot have European unification on a deregulated and neoliberal, monetarist, Austrian, speculative casino economy basis. You cannot build Europe of the banks and the cartels and the derivatives. This does not work. Friedrich List is the architect of the unity of Central Europe, the Zollverein, the customs union. This was to say Europe will be built on productive investment, industrial production, the Schuman Plan, Euratom, the European coal and steel community. It was not the European derivatives community. It was the European coal and steel community, the European atomic energy community, and so on down the line. This is the heart of the matter. Therefore, the only way to preserve Europe is to counterattack the speculators, wipe out derivatives, outlaw credit default swaps, outlaw collateralized debt obligations, tax the rest with a robust Tobin tax, Wall Street sales tax, Robin Hood tax, financial transfer tax, and so forth. Start fighting the banks. Stop worrying about the euro one way or another. Shift the entire discussion to a need to attack the forces of finance capital. And precisely as people have pointed out, the Dexia case, which has now gone bankrupt and been nationalized, they had completed their Tier 1 recapitalization according to these same criteria shortly before they blew. Sarkozy regrets the entry of Greece. Well, That's water under the bridge, Sarko. So now you've got to try to defend Europe, and that means dump you and go with the program that I'm saying. Berlusconi, of course, the center of a drama. Notice Cameron the wrecker, right? The British politicians uniformly saboteurs. De Gaulle was right. They are a Trojan horse inside Europe. They are there to wreck in the interests of Wall Street and the city of London. So maybe de Gaulle's methods would be the ones. Now, let's see. The couple of other points on Graeber. Let me just wrap up Graeber before we get into our next segment. The problem with Graeber is it's certainly important to recognize that money is a fetish in modern society. We've always argued on this program. Money is a political fiction. All money is fiat money. It means that it's a result of a political decision. So you can call it a fiction if you want to. But it is a useful way to move resources around. It's commonly understandable to say, I want $100 billion to go into health care instead of taking it out. That means transferring resources in. That is the purpose of money in a New Deal state. It should not be fetishized. So we know all about alienation. We know all about reification. We know all about fetishism and so forth. But the point is, it's not enough to develop a critique of alienation, fetishism, and reification from within those. You've got to get out of them and above them, and you've got to realize that they represent the subjective side of an economy under certain capitalist conditions, but there's also an objective side. The objective side is that the world's work has got to get done. We've got to have food production. We've got to have steel production, chemical production. We've got to produce all of these things. You can't distribute wealth until you have produced it. This Graeber does not have. The other thing is anarchism is usually associated with peasants. If you look at recent European history, the last 100 or 200 years, you'll see that the traction for anarchists, the popularity of anarchism, generally comes when you get a bunch of peasants, traditional peasants from a traditional farm society, and they are forced into big cities, and they're regimented under conditions of mass production in a modern factory. I'm thinking of Fiat, the one that I know quite well. You'd get peasants from Sardinia coming to Turin to work in the Fiat Mirafiori and the Fiat Lingotto plants, and they would have anarchist reactions. They didn't like it. They would look around at these anarchist Maoist groups, and these groups would be able to recruit at the gates of Mirafiori. What does it mean, though? What we're seeing today is that it's no longer anarchism of this type. If we look at Graeber, this is actually a post-Marxist ideological hangover, because we're told that Graeber became an anarchist at the age of 16 in Chelsea. That's sort of on the west side of Manhattan, above Greenwich Village, something like that. And that he's basically a red diaper baby. A father was in the Abraham Lincoln Brigade in Spanish Civil War. So the parents were old CP, old Communist Party USA, and he is part of the post-Marxist ideological hangover. Well, time to recognize that Marx was a British agent, that this was not an honest inquiry. His class analysis is worse than Machiavelli, and he doesn't understand that finance capital and industrial capital are two different breeds of cat. So we don't need this. In other words, we don't have to have a new kind of anarchism. It's a sort of an urban post-industrial service society anarchism. We don't need that to take the place of the old peasant-based anarchism. Get rid of these anarchists in whatever form. They mean that your movement will fail. Just that simple. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio.